G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to talk about Chaos Cultists. I spoke about it in my video yesterday, which has predictably pissed off a lot of people, and a lot of comments from people, both good and bad, and very interesting to note the people who said, you don't speak for me, I think the gold trim looks great. Well, when I said the majority of people don't really like the excessive gold trim, I think I was right, because you can see it, 2.3k votes, so nearly 2,500 people have voted on the poll I put up last night. Gold or silver trim on Chaos. 33% say it looks good, but it sucks to paint. So 1/3 of people are happy to live with it, but they don't enjoy painting it, but they're happy to live with it. 5% say it looks crap and it's just overdone, so they don't like it. 14% think looks fantastic. People who absolutely hate it, 2%. And it needs to be dialed down by, give or take 70%, it seems. 46% of respondees. So, give or take, out of 2.3 thousand people who have voted in this poll, 1,000 of them, and not necessarily 70%, we'll say maybe some of them think 40% less gold trim. Doesn't matter. Most people are saying, Games Workshop, if you listen, you might, maybe you don't, who cares? About 1,000 of those people, half the people who voted, are saying enough with the gold trim. So there you go, some objective numbers, community. Alright, let's move on. So, the Cultists, I spoke about them last night and how disappointed I am by them and how I wish they moved towards something like the Imperial Army. And so this is our current Cultists of the Abyss that's available from the Blackstone Fortress. Yeah, not great. Not terrible either, by the way. But they fulfill a certain niche. Before I really focus on this, do I talk about this now? This is Genestealer cults, obviously. Look at how Genestealer cults are portrayed. Brood Brothers, they're portrayed as a simply regular Imperial Guardsmen with a slight head swap going on there, a little bit of mutated Genestealery head, but they're organised, they're armed, they've got their body armour, they know what they're doing. The equipment, it's not all dilapidated equipment. Yeah, it's mining equipment that they've pressed into, military service or whatever, but serviceable equipment. Even if we go up and we look at the Neophyte Hybrids, who are basically essentially your mining crew. So the most basic of the Genestealer cults, just miners. They're organised. They carry a range of weapons, and yeah, the weapons have their own blend of markings on them, like little hazard stripes and stuff like that, but the weapons are in good condition. They're not dilapidated. They're not just wrapped in rags. They don't look like orcs' weaponry. And this is miners. This isn't trained military units. These are just people who are part of a mining cabal on a planet. And contrast it with these cultists, what Chaos is getting. So you see the difference. Chaos is a disorganized rabble of almost orc-level ineptitude. I mean, doesn't one of these guys, like this guy here, or this guy, is a stick with nails in it. That's the best he could do. Meanwhile, these guys over here, some miners, have got shotguns, auto guns, and crazy mining tools. It just blows my mind. Of all the things you can do with cults, like, they've got motorcycles and matching uniforms, like a cult would have. Cults generally, tend to congregate in the same sort of vibe, right? So, take a look at the Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress sort of traitor guard. That looks like cultists to me, or closer to what some sort of chaos-aligned militia force should look like. They've clearly got functional weapons, they've got functioning body armor, like they care about their own survival, because I'm going to say you're no good to your god's purposes if you are dead, but for Chaos that might be an exception to the rule. Maybe your dying helps summon a demon. Could be useful to the cause, but still. Basically, Chaos Cultists are being done wrong. And there are certain situations for a useless rabble horde like this. It could be a group of peasants, psychopaths, weirdos, rounded up by someone like the Iron Warriors. And they throw them into the guns of the enemy first, just to deplete the enemy of ammo before the Iron Warriors actually stage the real attack. Yeah, viable, valid tactic, cool, respected. But look over at something like Necromunda. You could see plotters and schemers like Dalak Gang here being, working for Zinch or working for the Alpha Legion. Schemers and plotters and, outcasts from society, but that is potential. I mean, look in general at the different sort of cults we have. Carrick Acolytes are essentially a cult. It's in the name. Acolytes. They're following someone. Now, whether it's a magister or whatever it might be. These guys are a type of cult, and they're a fantasy edition. Same here. The Darkness, Slaves of Darkness Corvus Cabal from Warcry. Clearly, some sort of tribal theme here, but it could be a Cult of the Raven, maybe Zinch followers from 40k. You don't know. I don't know. Splintered Fang here. Again, these would make some really cool open Alpha Legion cultists. And yeah, obviously they're very fantasy miniatures. They're not armed with 40k war gear, but then how is that any different to Guy with Stick? Slap an auto gun on them and you're there. Essentially, Guy with Stick is as well armed for fighting in 40k as the Splintered Fang. Slaves of Darkness, Iron Golems, cool looking, maybe pseudo-Khorne cultists. The options that are out there for these gangs, like a pseudo-Slaneshi self-mutilation cult, is what I see when I look at the Unmade here. That's cool. That's interesting. Okay? Even the Blackstone Fortress Warhammer Quest guardsmen here, there's something interesting going on with them. They seem like you could make a credible military force out of them. And if we go on to, through Necromunda, something like this Ash Wastes Nomad Gang. This is literally scavengers living in the wastes outside of a hive city, and they are more uniform with better equipment than the Chaos freaking cultists have. But this is the best you can do, Games Workshop. This is the best. Where did she get the horned helmet from? Where did this guy get that weird... The guy with the fire stick, where did he get that weird spiky chest helmet protector thingy from? What? How did they get that stuff and yet can't get good weapons and put on a shirt, guys? Get a shirt. Just it does my head in. I mean, look, these are nice models. These are perfectly functional. These are probably a better 40k cultist group. They could be a group of individuals who were kicked out of a hive city on their planet, and they've banded together and they've fallen to chaos. Because chaos is insidious. Chaos is not just one day you're working for the Imperium, the next you've got an 8-pointed star carved into your forehead and you're eating babies. Chaos tends to not work like that in the setting, and that's what makes it interesting. Because it's got some depth to it. It's not just Saturday morning cartoon villain maniacal evil. Chaos is interesting because many of the people that fall to chaos don't realise they've fallen to chaos until they're too far down the path. Classic example of that would be the Astral Claws. The Astral Claws in the Badab War. They had been through the grinder, the meat grinder, fighting against chaos and orcs and other Xenos species, and they were depleted in number, and they were getting very little help from the wider Imperium because the Imperial bureaucracy in 40k is so tedious that they weren't being kept up with supplies and manpower and help to fight the war. So they started withholding their tithe, the taxes essentially that they pay to, as feudal lords, to the Imperium. So they held on to their GNC and they said, you know what? Screw the 1,000-man limit on a chapter. We need more troops if we're going to rebuild successfully and fight future wars. And this led other chapters to intervene on behalf of the Imperium, and that's what led to the Badab conflict. And eventually, the Astral Corps kept falling down the path of madness and became what we know today as the Red Corsairs, the traitor Marines of Chaos. And that's all they are, by the way, traitor Space Marines. They're not traitor legions or anything. And they start out with noble intentions. We need to build up our strength, and we can't depend on the wider Imperium. We need to look after our own if we're going to save the Imperium. And it got turned on them to the point where they became some of the deepest traitors in the galaxy, arguably more successful traitors than Abaddon seems to be. And they didn't even realize it was happening to them until they were already down the path of chaos. That's interesting, that's depth, and that's what people like about playing Chaos. Not everyone, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. Some people do like maniacal, chaotic evil. But evil that has a purpose, evil that is just sinister in nature, and it's conniving, and it's thinking, it's plotting, it's scheming, that kind of evil is incredibly interesting versus I am evil for the sake of being evil. Meh. That kind of evil is not very interesting. And He-Man was better. Corpse Grinder cult gang here. I mean, again, look at these cultists. This does not look out of place for a Necromunda gang. And all these new reveals, same thing. Does not look out of place for a Necromunda gang. Can afford a crazy barbarian gladiator helmet, can't afford a shirt. Corpse Grinders. They would make a perfectly fine Khorne cultist group for 40k. So, what demographic are these appealing to? Maybe word bearers. They might have a rabble, I guess, of just zealotous followers. Sure. Night Lords, could you see these guys working for the Night Lords? The Night Lords would despise these people as being weak. They wouldn't be working for the World Eaters. The World Eaters would just want some more blood-crazed maniacs to join them. And these people do not fit that bill. Slaanesh, well, no, these people don't have anywhere near the excess required to join Slaanesh. None of them are crazy overweight eaters with substance abuse problems and the sexual appetite of Harvey Weinstein. So none of that's very good. Tzeentch, well, come on, Tzeentch has standards, and these are well below that. And obviously Nurgle, well, Nurgle, he needs people who are a bit sickly, let's be honest. So the only really demographic these guys are fulfilling is the Word Bearers one. And even then, it's a pretty thin basis, because there's nothing stopping the Word Bearers from, bringing these guys along to the battle. Frankly, House Cawdor looks better for Word Bearers, because they look more like medieval feudal peasants, which adds to that grimdark feel of the Warhammer universe, where it is basically feudalism gone wrong in space. And when you look at things like the Cawdor Redemptionists, you tell me these guys don't look like Word Bearers. They are one Aquila becoming a Chaos Star away from full-on parties with the devil. Just look at them. They would look perfectly good, along with the rest of the Cawdor gang, as Word Bearers cultists. So I see very little to no value in these cultists. They don't represent any threatening Chaos faction to me. Whereas, again, if we go and look at something like the Genestealer cults, everyone has a place in there. It's a structured force. And if you think about a cult in real life, there are plenty of real-life cults. We can look at them so we can see how cults operate. Many of them have cloaks, or they have hoods, or they have uniforms of some kind. It could be something as basic as your Freemasons. It could be a Ku Klux Klan. Okay, these cults are very real, and they have their little uniforms and their rituals and their ranks and their names and their positions. And that makes perfectly good sense, because humans are mostly organised creatures. They like some kind of organisation, utter chaos in their lives, or chaos existing in the universe of 40k does not directly one-to-one translate to utter chaos in their armies. Their armies are still perfectly functioning. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, as with anything, so forgive the generalisation, but Chaos armies tend to be pretty high functioning, and it's being robbed of them. That high functioning ability is being taken away from them in this quest to make them so far away from what the Imperium is, to keep them as the antagonists in the setting, and the Imperium as the good guys. But the problem is the Imperium are not the good guys in the setting. They are just as bad as Chaos, but they're two sides of the same coin. The Imperium is authoritarian, and Chaos is anarchic, for example. The Chaos is the dark reflection of what the Imperium could become, and people who live under the Imperium might not find their lives any worse off living under Chaos, or vice versa, because the Imperium has a lot of bad things going on. It is not a utopia, and that's the problem. It's the grim, dark future of 40,000, where a planet might have been exposed to a demonic incursion, and rather than risk the incursion coming back because people remembered it from the last time, the Inquisition will just go in there and murder everyone and repopulate the planet with people forcibly taken from another planet. Do they sound like the good guys to you? So, obviously, Cultists, not in a great place for Chaos. And look, Genestealer cults are doing it right, and that's why nobody complains, because Genestealer cults suck. It's like, Genestealer cults are just what you want. Even look at the Aberrants here. A good example of less is more. They've taken the basic design elements of the Genestealer cults as a whole. I should bring them up on screen so we can talk about them. They've taken the basic design elements. They've taken the Neophyte Hybrids, their uniforms. They've essentially torn the uniforms away, but left little bits of, say, like the greaves or the shin protection on this front guy here with his signpost. And then the rest of his body is essentially taking bits and pieces of Genestealers and grafting it on. That's interesting. If you did the same thing with Chaos, if you took a regular mortal human and you mixed them with a bloodletter or a demonette, or even look at Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, and the Twin Souls. They're not perfect by any means. They've got weird looking faces, but Twin Souls is a concept of taking regular humans, and I'll bring them up, taking regular humans and blending them with demonettes. That's an interesting concept. And that's more interesting for your Chaos Cultists than to simply have this. Yeah, it's a bunch of shirtless dudes cosplaying in their Viking helms. They're about to go storm the American Congress on January 6th. Like, what are you trying to get at here? It's a total rabble, not an organised cult, versus what is an organised cult. And it has its many flavours. It's got vehicles, it's got infantry, it's got heavier units and monsters, it's got bikes, it's got cavalry, right? Magus, banners, locusts. Interesting stuff is happening over here in the Genestealer cults. And, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to see a Chaos version of these vehicles? You know, when the mining equipment isn't being run by the Genestealer cults, and instead they're running a human sacrifice ring in the back of the vehicle because Chaos cultists instead took their mining equipment and changed it over. That makes an awful lot more sense to me. But instead, what we get is shirtless men and women with sticks with rusty nails in it. Not even rusty nails, they're pretty clean nails. This guy actually polishes and upkeeps his weapons. He's switched on. But people with sticks and no shirts, and because of the way the body armor is so crudely manufactured and held on with things like leather straps, if it wasn't for the frag grenades and the auto pistols, you would not recognize these as models from 40k. They really don't look 40k. I mean, look at these two models here. Take away the pistols, what have you got? You have Age of Sigmar miniatures, and even then, they're not as good as, well, Age of Sigmar miniatures, who do look great. So, anyway, that's it. That's all from me. I just want to expand on yesterday's video, because I don't think people really, from reading the comments, I don't think everyone really got on the same page as me. They are missing the point of the argument, because they would come down simply on the side of, well, I run word bearers, they work for me, therefore they're good. It's like, look at the wider picture, guys. Chaos as a whole. It's the same thing I complained about yesterday when talking about the legions. People want Chaos Legions. They don't want Black Legion. But all they have to work with is Black Legion models. And, if they wanted to play Iron Warriors, they should be in Mark III armor. For example, would be great Iron Warriors armor for Chaos Space Marines in 40k. Or maybe Alpha Legion. Go all out and have that Mark VI power armor and mix in like the scale aesthetics from 30k and stuff, and that would be really cool for an Alpha Legion 40k army. But you don't have that choice, you just have generic Black Legion. And that doesn't work for everyone either, because, well, Chaos is always been to me three books. You have Legions and Demons. Legions and Demons together because they're the tightest of the relationships, really. And the Demons are in there to make up for what Chaos lacks in war gear. Chaos lacks the land speeders and the jet bikes and the 80 different variants of Land Raiders and all the Primaris grav tanks and all that crap. And they made up for it in the past historically by having demons. They would have your greater demons, your lesser demons, your demon princes, your demon beasts, and demon engines. And by adding all that into the Chaos Codexes, you lost some, but you gained some right now. But then, when they split the two apart and made them into their own codexes, you shrunk both forces dramatically in the availability of their troops and equipment. Which is a problem. And then, on top of that, the fact that you broke them down and you split their equipment apart. But, Thousand of Suns were great because you could pull in hordes of cheap horrors, for example, and supplement them with power-armored Thousand Suns, the elite heavy-hitting infantry, and there was a good two-punch combination in there. Demonettes worked really well. It's fast, fragile, hit like a freight train versus Marines, which are a bit more tanky, a little bit slower, don't hit as hard. Getting across the battlefield, the two complement one another. Great, awesome, that's Legions. Then you have Chaos Renegades. And Chaos Renegades should essentially have all the stuff the Imperium has, but you fall into Chaos so you lose some of the perks rules-wise, like, and they shall know no fear, or whatever other else at the time the game system utilizes. Because they've just turned to Chaos, like the Astral Cores falling to Chaos at Badab. They didn't just go into their houses one day, come out the next day wearing red armor. They swapped all their silver to red overnight, and then put all the land speeders that the chapter held in a big bonfire and burnt them all. No, they would have still had that equipment. They still had the Whirlwinds, the Vindicators, all the whatever other units Chaos doesn't have access to, like assault cannons. Oh, they haven't in 10,000 years learned how to pick up an assault cannon off a corpse? It's just some strange stuff to me. So chapters, Renegade chapters should be their own thing, and alongside that, you should have Renegade Guard, the Imperial Guard that have gone over to Chaos, and essentially, just like Renegade chapters, they're very much like the Space Marine chapters, well, Renegade Guard should be, hey, this is all the basic humans of a regular guard company turned to Chaos, and, it's had an effect on them, we'll say. That's what we should be seeing, but we don't get that. Instead, what we get is just, again, I'll say it, shirtless dudes and women carrying medieval weapons into battle. They don't even have sharp edges, and all the blades are stuffed. Every one of their swords is like a rusted old cleaver that they've pulled out of a river, covered in notches. The hell is going on here? Is this the best organised resistance a group that defies Imperial rule could come up with on the planets of the Imperium? Because they make the Genestealer cults look really, really, really good in comparison. I mean, many cults are started by things like Zinch sorcerers and Alpha Legion infiltrators planting the seeds and essentially orchestrating the cults from behind the scenes. Are you telling me this is the best that they could recruit? Jeez. Anyway, if you want more on this, obviously look at my previous video, and also look at a video done by Northern Exile. It echoes almost to the T many of the sentiments I expressed in my original video, plus some that brush on what I talk about in this video. So go check that out. Smaller channel, and he's a former Games Workshop employee, so has a lot of insight in that regard if you're interested in it. And yeah, that's all from me. Please, hopefully everyone took in what I'm trying to say today, and obviously spit back out at me, challenge my ideas, right? Come at me and say, well, you know what, this is what you got wrong and here's why. Cool, I totally respect it. So throw it at me in the comments below, and I'll see you all on the next one.